Okay, so it's the next day, next morning after we sat the cab back onto the frame yesterday. And in the previous video, chapter 31, what you saw me do was kind of even out those bolts that are supporting the front of the cab up off of the original cab mount brackets. What I do not know is if the cab is straight. When we sat this cab down onto the frame, or not onto the frame, but put these boards under there and put these rods that support the front cab brackets up, I don't know whether it's running parallel, the cab is running parallel with the frame. So what I'm going to do is start checking it out. I came over here this morning and was kind of looking around, kind of getting a gauge for how much distance was in between the bottom of the cab and the top of the frame rail, and kind of thinking how raising this cab up will affect the steps to get up into the cab, and to affect how the saddle tanks for the fuel are going to be mounted on that. Now, it can't, raising the cab up can't do anything but help with the fuel tank mounting process, because that will allow the fuel tanks to be raised up farther on the frame rails, giving it probably better support. In the same way with the battery boxes or steps that are going to be put onto it. But I still need to think about whether I want to keep it up or how far I want to keep it up. So one of the first things that I'm going to do right now, and I'll switch camera and go to the tripod mounted camera, is kind of try and figure out what the relationship to the cab is. In other words, we've got those two boards under there, underneath the back, holding it up. But is that, in fact, is the cab square to the frame with just two boards in the way that I position them rods, which I never took the cab being parallel to the frame rails or how square it was to the frame into consideration when I adjusted those rods in the front. I just adjusted them so that they were even with one another. I did not adjust them so that the cab was square or anything. So that's probably the first thing that's got to be done. And I'm going to start checking that right now before I go get into figuring out how high I want to raise that cab up. Okay, I'm going to give you a little shot here and put this video clip in to where I had left off with the first clip. I'm going to show you some preparation that I did to try and square the cab up. And when I say square the cab up, I'm talking about running the cab parallel with the frame. Not squaring it up, centering the bolts, the existing mounting bolts up for the cab to the frame is going to kind of keep it square to it. I have taken some measurements, like to the edge of the rockers, the edge of the rockers to the frame rails on both sides, and it's within 1/8 of an inch, but I don't even really think that matters. Yeah, having the cab exactly square, or square to the frame isn't a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal if it was off quite a ways. You know, it would look, you would be sitting at an angle to the way the vehicle is going down the road. But, you know, if it's within 1/4 of an inch, you probably never even notice it. Somebody driving behind you possibly could notice it, but you would probably never notice it sitting in the cab. The same way as if you've seen a vehicle that's tracking to the side, or like a semi-truck where the trailer is tracking to the side, the driver probably doesn't really notice it as much as you do following it. It's hard to get a good perception of what the vehicle is doing in the rear view mirrors, because you don't know whether the mirrors are cocked off to the side or it's actually the vehicle that's cocked off to the side. But anyways, I regress here. This video is going to be, you're going to see some things done, and as you can see from the video, there is some things done that we haven't gotten to in the first clip of this part of the video. But what I wanted to do is tell you that there is a lot of preparation work that has to go into this. I got the cab onto it, but I've got to tell you, I thought about lowering the engine to help do that. I never actually gave thought to raising the cab up before we actually put the cab back on and came up with the idea of raising it up a little bit. We jacked it up and had it up in the air to kind of center it, and I'm thinking, well, once we got it up in the air, why the hell not keep it up in the air? Again, it's going to give me better visibility. So we're going to go through this video, and I'm probably going to throw a lot of inserts in there. There's going to be some prep work done onto this thing, but I'm also going to discuss other things that are brought up that I really didn't think about beforehand. One of the things would be, you know, it'd be nice if I had all of the stuff here that I could fit onto it. But then again, like when I say all this stuff, I'm talking about the tanks, the saddle tanks, the battery boxes that are going to be used as the steps to get up into the cab, the sleeper, and get it fit all together. But, you know, me doing things like raising the cab might lead to other options as far as battery boxes, fuel tanks, or sleepers go. So it would be nice to have it here so that I could see how it all fits together. But on the other hand, it's kind of best that if I don't get it first and then find something that would suit the purpose better, another option that would suit the purpose better, but I've already purchased something that might not be to my liking as the build progresses. So let's go on from that first clip. I just did that clip about being the next morning and not knowing whether the cab was parallel to the frame rail, and what I did was got the square and brought it over here and sat it on, and I'll show it to you. It's on the frame now, level with the frame, and there it is. I mean, we're touching down there and touching up here. Now there's a little variation in here. Let me go get a flashlight and I'll show it to you, but I gotta tell you, it's jammed awful close. But let me go get a flashlight and I'll show you the variation. So what we have is we have some body panels, and what I did is threw a level on that before, but as you can see, it is touching down here. Let me It's on a crease. Let me show you that. I'm going to pick the tripod up and move you over, but let me show it to you. See what it is it's on that indentation right there, but let me see if I can get it up farther and away from that indentation and bring you back and show it to you again. I mean, it's so close. What I think it does have to do is be lowered in the front or picked up a little in the back, but it's so damn close that it's kind of unbelievable that we got that out of pure luck. But anyways, I'll bring it back. Okay, so what I did was I lowered the rear end to get the frame fairly level. Now, because the pumpkin is offset on that axle, as you're looking at the left-hand side, the axle between the center line of the pumpkin and the hub is a lot longer than it is on the right-hand side. So I had the jack under there, but what it did is when I lowered it, it kind of offset it a little bit. So to compensate for that, and it's fairly close right now, to compensate for it, what I did is just put the jack under this side and kind of picked up on it so that it took that kind of twist out of the frame. So the frame is fairly level. It's kind of between the lines. It's hard to adjust that one jack. But if you come over here, now we squared up that back, but if you come over here to the rockers, and hopefully you can maybe get a visual on it, you can see that the front of it is pitched up according to, let me get it off of that. It's pitched up according to this. There's a little bump right there, so I wanted to get off of that bump, but so it looks like that front has to come down. So I am going to try and take it down and level this thing out according to that. And I will bring you back after I've done it. It's probably going to be a long, tedious process, but let me bring you back, and then we'll also compare the squareness of that back with a square off of the frame. Okay, another clip insert. The one thing that I had discussed before when I left off the last time was bringing you back and showing you the that I lowered it and leveled it out. I didn't make a video on that, so let me just explain to you. I did lower it, I did level it, and gauge it visually, the cab rockers with the frame, so that it looks visually like it's parallel with it, and it also is level. The rocker is level at the same level as the frame rails. So let me continue on here, but I just wanted to interject that I did not bring you back for that, and this is that discussion. Okay, so let me just kind of tell you where we're at, kind of going, where we're at and where we're going. I put the cab back on here so that I could get a good feeling for how the cab is going to fit in relationship to the engine and the transmission. So as I've discussed, I kind of raised the cab up, and if I haven't put the video, depending on how these videos get edited into this chapter, if I haven't put the section in about the motor mount spacers, I will do so, but so I will discuss, or have discussed with you, what I'm going to use for the spacers on the front motor mount. The rear motor, or I'm sorry, the front cab mounts. The rear cab mounts are going to be kind of a tubing type situation because they are round, so they will just be made out of pipe and kind of configured the same way as the front cab mounts were. So getting the cab back on, not only is it providing me relationships to the engine transmission, engine where the block or where the doghouse has got to be made to fit around the engine, where the floor pan has to be cut out to get the shifter back in. But there is also the other things that I've kind of hit upon. Okay, sorry, I got interrupted. Somebody came in. So anyways, what I need to do is figure out where those cuts and have to be for the motor clearance. Have to figure out where the cuts have to be for the stick on the transmission. But while it's here, I kind of need to figure out other things along the lines of the thing. Raising the cab up is going to give me more clearance for battery boxes, more clearance for fuel tanks, more clearance for, or options for running the exhaust, running other things in the truck. So what I'm kind of doing, and some of the things that I will do, I'm going to cut the dog coop out, or cut the slot out for the dog coop while the cab is sitting onto the frame, just so that I can make sure that I've got clearance for everything. I don't necessarily have to cut this part out for the shifter. I can just mark it out in the floor. And again, because I've raised this up, I can lower the floor in the cab now somewhat around this area, still maintain this raised area back here if I have to do exhaust or want to run the exhaust above the frame rails. Maintain that, but lower the other part where the seats potentially are probably going to be sitting. So I've also brought it back here, and I've got this board laying here, and you just might think it's a board, but what that board represents is kind of the average width of a sleeper. So here is where the sleeper, the outside of the sleeper will sit, is where this board is. Now, it might look wide to you, but again, given length of or width of a truck or a trailer, is 8'6", and this is less than 8 foot. It's 94 inches, or what would that be? 7'10", 7'8". So those are things that I need to take into consideration before, and I just want to make sure that all my bases are covered before I pull this cab back off again, because a lot of the things that can be need to be done inside of the cab, wiring, actually physically building the dog coop, redoing the floor, stuff like that can be done with the cab off the frame. And I'm going to pull the cab back off of the frame again, logically, because I want to take that engine transmission out. The engine is going to be rebuilt. And I'm going to pull the engine back out, the transmission back out, and so that I can get the engine rebuilt and get everything all painted up before I put it back in there again as an assembly. Much easier and more convenient to do that without the cab on. So the other things that can need to be done with the cab can be done with the cab off. But I want to leave this cab onto the frame, get the brackets and cab brackets, mounting brackets made and assembled on the frame, and leave it on the frame so that I make sure that I get all of my bases covered and I know where I'm going with dimensions and height, and how kind of everything is going to incorporate into the cab being raised up off of the frame before I remove it to rebuild the engine and get everything in the drivetrain taken care of before I set it back in here again and then put the cab back on. So I just wanted to convey that to you. There's a lot of thought, a lot of issues that have to be looked at, addressed, whether they can be done with the cab off frame or whether they need to be done and addressed with the cab on frame. So before I pull the cab, need to kind of think my way through every issue that could be needed to be addressed before I do pull the cab. Bring you back. Okay, so it's Monday morning, and I didn't come in over the weekend, but last Friday, before I left, what I had done was marked out where the shifter is going to go down through the floor pan of the cab in relationship to this piece that comes off that held, this is where the old shifter went, this is where the brake lever went down through. So that was an accessible floor pan piece. And what I did is marked out the relationship of where the transmission falls in relationship to this floor pan piece and in relationship to the cab. And you can probably see the lines there where it is. So I cut this out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be in the process of cutting that out. Now, with that being said, there is a possibility that I will be removing or lowering some of this floor pan to make some extra headroom in here, but I am not sure of that yet. So what I'm going to do is I've cut this out, going to be cutting that out and set the shifter in there. And it's not going to make any, I mean, it's going to be extra work, but if I do lower the floor of the cab down, you know, it's just, was it a waste of time? Well, I don't really know, because I don't know whether lowering the floor of the cab down, if I do it, if I'm going to reuse this stuff or just build a new floor pan for the cab. So what I need to do is just get the shifter in there, find out the relationship of that into the cab, and then if I do lower it down, well, it was a little extra work, but it wasn't really lost, because at least I'll know the relationship of the shifter to where kind of approximately the dashboard and everything else is going to be. That won't change if I lower the cab of the floor down, or the floor cab down. But I'll bring you back after I get it cut out. Okay, just to show you this, I've got that, I cut that floor pan out and installed the shifter. Now, the hole that I cut out is a lot bigger than the shifter pattern. There is a lot more room there, but if I do keep it, what I want to do is be able to at least access a shifter in case I had to get to the top of the transmission. I would be able to pull the shifter and that plate out through that hole. Again, and that only applies if I if I leave it. Now, if I lower this thing, I will also provide a hole in there that is big enough to get that plate, and the plate is that plate that sits on the top of the transmission and holds the shifter mechanism into the gear selector slide inside of the transmission. So if I ever had to get that out, I would be able to access it through the hole in the floorboard of the cab. I will show it to you. What I'm gonna do is just kind of put that thing back on, this cover plate back on. Then what I'm gonna do is start marking out what I need to cut out for that dog coop arrangement. And just a brief shot. There it is with that cover plate back in, that original cover plate back in. Now I haven't bolted it, but all the holes line up, and it will kind of depress and reform to that original shape. However, part of it is going to have to be cut out up there. But let me bring you back. What I'm going to try and do is get, I don't know whether you can see it or not because of the light. Yeah. There's that padding that's up there. Insulation, padding, sound deadening material that was original to the truck. Got to pull that out, and before I can cut this thing out. Okay, we're at the front of the truck, and as you can see, I have cut that firewall out to accept the head. Now, the part over to the right is the intake manifold the intake manifold that sticks off of, as we're looking at it, the right hand side of the head. Let me take you over to the head and I'll show it to you, but first I'll take you inside of the cab and kind of show you the cut from the inside. And here it is from the inside. Now I'm not really sure how well you're going to be able to see it. I don't have a light in here that shines directly onto it, so I'm not really sure how well you're going to be able to see it. As you can see from the tooling here, I used a Sawzall. What I actually did is I took a cutting wheel on a grinder, right angle grinder, and made slots where I wanted it, and then just cut it out by sticking the Sawzall blade through the slots and going where I wanted to. But again, that angle over there is, sorry, that light blew out. That angle over there is for the head, and I'll take you over and show that to you right now. So here we are over to the head, and even though it's sitting up on its side, this is what I'm talking about. This intake manifold protrudes off of the side of the head. So I cut it out for that. Now it's going to be fairly low, definitely not as high as the valve covers, but you can see that I angled it over there. And what I'm going to do right now is set the head on. Okay, there is the head back on the engine. Now, what I want to do is cut this out a little more down here, just so I have a little more clearance into there to get that intake manifold on. And here is the back side of it. Yeah. What do I need to do? Do I need to do anything in here? No. I do not need to do anything in here. It's very evident that that dog coop has to be removable because those three head bolts in the back will have to be gone in through there. But there it is. I mean, I've got it. Now all I've got to do is kind of figure out how I am going to build the dog coop. As I said before, there's probably going to be an issue with the gas pedal coming back in there, but again, I can bring the gas pedal over and I can probably bring it over and down, but let me see. Yeah, I can bring it over and down. I mean, it's going to be tight, no doubt, but it'll work. Okay, final thoughts on this. In the last clip, I said that I had to make that doghouse removable to get the head bolts out. Well, that's not the case. This is a head bolt that goes in there, and as you can see, I can get it out. I mean, that stuff is in the way right there, but if I bring that up and over like that, I would be able to get it out from the engine compartment. Again, that stuff is in the way, but anyways, so I set this that original removable pan back in. It's got to be cut back a little bit on the back side of the head, and that dog could come out and tie right into that. And again, there's going to have to be a little bit of modification made onto the accelerator or gas pedal. But it's all doable, it's all workable, and I've got the throw of the shifter down so that I know how much space is going to come out. Now, I told you that I was going to be removing the cab so that I could pull the engine out, and I am going to be doing that. But one of the things that I can do, now that I know the relationship of the engine to the inside of the cab, is I don't have to actually remove this cab off of there. What I can do is pick it up and pull it back, rest it in back, while I take the engine and transmission out to rebuild the engine and make whatever modifications I'm going to do to it, clean up that transmission and get it all painted and everything, and get ready to set back in. But in the meantime, I can just pull this cab back off of here, maybe set it on the back, and as I'm doing the rebuild on the engine and cleaning and painting the transmission, I can actually set the cab back on here again to make adjustments in place for whatever I'm going to do, building the dog coop in, maybe modifying the gas or accelerator pedal to fit around that dog coop, figure out whether I'm going to lower the floor pan down for the seats, and whatever else has to be done. So when I say take it off, I'm not physically going to take it off and move it back over by the welding area again. I'm probably just going to set it back over on the back side of the frame so that I can move it back after I get the engine and transmission out of it. But I know this has been a long video, and there's been a lot of talking in it, in little working. Well, there was working on my part, it just wasn't shown. But Again, you know, I'm still recovering from that issue of the thing is not supposed to be lifting stuff. So the progress is going along. I'm getting better. I'm going to start breaking back into being able to do lifting and getting some stuff organized around there. So this is going to be it for this chapter. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm sorry that it was such a long video and so much talking, but all of these issues have to be resolved. Again, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe.